Hi, everybody. All right, welcome to week 3, and we are moving on in literary theory to critical race theory. There's a similarity of logic that, as with the introduction on feminism, that feminism takes shape within a certain context. It wants to fight certain things without being assimilated to them. There are assumptions that are in place that preclude, say, feminist literature from even being considered to be a thing. Well, the same thing applies to the notion of non-white literature, particularly Black literature. So the literature written by Black people, but not only Blacks. But again, the context is America, and the context is that particular racial situation. Again, predominantly in the 60s. Obviously, goes back much further than that. So you notice the time period. You notice the sort of logic. There's a sort of pattern to the logic that is beginning to take shape. Those are a couple of things to notice from Rivkin and Ryan. The other thing is that after you get that little introduction, you get 4 paragraphs that attend to 4 different groups. And just notice that. Just notice that structural organization can help you to be able to make sense of a reading that is not too long, but it's a little bit long and pretty dense. And the other thing to notice is the vocabulary that's associated with each of the groups. Now, I think what they're doing is they're taking advantage of their structure to introduce a certain word in a certain context. But the notion of border doesn't belong to just, say, Chicano literature. But they take each paragraph as an opportunity to introduce 1 or 2 terms. So note those terms, let them become part of your own vocabulary as well. So then we get into the reading by Lisa Lowe. And like the Irigaray reading, I think this is just super, super important. I think it's really clear. You see what's at stake. I'm not saying that I think Lisa Lowe is right or wrong, but for simply understanding what's going on in critical race theory, this is a really great reading. And it's great not only for critical race theory, but because some of the terminology absolutely applies to feminism and to a whole bunch of the other theories that we're going to be looking at as well. We already saw last week this difference between essentialism and constructivism. Those are difficult terms. Well, the terms that we meet this week, heterogeneity, hybridity, multiplicity, very much apply and can be used in the context of thinking about particularly constructivism. So take note, this is a really important week, I would say, for acquiring key vocabulary and wrapping your mind around what's important to these theorists. So within that, I think, well, what the heck? Why are we beginning this? Why do I have to learn these 3 terms from Japanese culture? And why going into the subtleties of Asian poetry and this and that. So you have to sort of persevere for a little bit. And then when you get to page 1033, you should be able to see how things kind of crystallize, and she makes her move. It's quite interesting that she does this in a long paragraph. I want you to notice that. On page 1033, the key paragraph is very long. And if we were in class, I would be asking you this. I'd be trying to tease this out of you. I'd be taking my time. I don't just want to dish it up on a platter. You should notice that the move is made in the middle of the paragraph. Why that? Why? Think about that. Why in her form, in her style, in her writing? Why does she make her move embedded within a long paragraph? I'm going to let you sit with that for a little bit. But what you should notice is that the paragraph begins with talking about generational thinking, that this is a standard way of perceiving what's going on in certain literatures, particularly Asian literature. And for her, this is a problem. And what she wants to do is she wants to suggest that generational thinking needs to shift to something else. And the key here is that even within a generation, you find differences between people. So the problem is a little bit like the problem between essentialism and constructivism. What Lisa Lowe does not want you to do, does not want writers to do, does not want anyone to do, is to think, oh, okay, that generation, they all thought like this. Well, that generation, they all had this experience. That for her is an overgeneralization. And overgeneralization goes along with the notion of essentialism. So what she wants you to do is to say, look, whatever category or subcategory that you come up with, note that that category is itself not as unified or homogeneous as you may think it is. There are differences within whatever category that you come up with. Now, you should be able to see that what we're talking about here is logic itself. When you think logically, you come up with categories. So the category is a way of assimilating different things. And then you use that to say, to just organize things in your mind, and indeed to organize things in your writing and in society in all kinds of ways, right? And what she's wanting to say is, look, thinking in terms of categories overlooks, it misses some of the differences, the particularities within the category. So the three words that she emphasizes in this reading, that she puts, that are made to be the title, hybridity, heterogeneity, multiplicity, those should become like a refrain for you. You're going to hear those terms over and over throughout the term because they apply to so many of the different theories that we're going to look at. And there are other terms that go along with those three that you're going to begin to see in this reading. Words like specificity, particularity. So I want you to begin to be very attentive to those terms. They will help you enormously to come to grips with this material. And then finally, there's the short story by Tan. And another nice little story. And given what happens in Lisa Lowe's introduction, she actually mentions Amy Tan by name. You may think, oh, okay, so I guess I know what kind of a reading I'm getting. And I think that that's true. I don't think I'm going to give anything away by saying that Lisa Lowe thinks of Amy Tan as a generational writer. So she sees her as somewhat problematic. But here's the thing with literary theory. When we're sensitized to notions like heterogeneity, hybridity, and multiplicity, then we can apply them everywhere. And it is possible for us to apply those terms to a short story by Tan. So we can ask ourselves, is she just a generational thinker? Or are there elements within her story that can be looked at from the point of view of heterogeneity, hybridity, and multiplicity? And even beyond that, here's really the crux of the matter. Even if Amy Tan does intend to talk about generations, and a conflict between generations? Is it possible to analyze her story in the terms that she wouldn't have intended? So the key word here is the word intention, or the idea of an authorial intention. And it's really basic to literary criticism that we not think ourselves simply as trying to mine for the author's intention. Our problems wouldn't all be solved. The work of the literary critic is not done just because the author tells us what they intended. Obviously, for people in the past, like Chaucer and Shakespeare, we can't wake them up to ask them what their intention was. So we have a problem there. But even if we could, knowing the author's intention is not the be-all and the end-all. And we'll get into more of that later. But it's important even here. It's important for all theories. In fact, for some theorists, that is the point, right? That, oh, right, I come along and I can undercut, I can undermine, I can read against the grain because I can see that you as a white writer, or you as a male writer, or, you as whatever you are doing things other than what you perhaps intended. That's part of the richness. That's part of what the critic brings to bear in the process of reading and analyzing. They can bring out other dimensions of what's going on in a text.